The Downtown Rams podcast is brought to you today by Draft. Looking for the best fantasy sports site on the planet? Sign up with Draft today. For a limited time only, our listeners will receive $3 matching their first deposit of at least $10. Use promo code DTR or visit draft.com/DTR to sign up now. Draft. Fantasy for the people. Now enjoy the show.
Caught by Brandon Cooks. Shoot your arrows. Cooper Kupp plucks it out of the air and gives the Rams the lead. Robert Wood, touchdown. LA. Goff goes crashing into the end zone. Aaron Donald almost beat the football there. Corey Littleton, have yourself a day. Picked off. Marcus Peters coming off the edge, and Ryan will be wrapped up by Clay Matthews. Everett in stride. Wow!
Franklin Myers gets his hand down there.
Leto got a hand on it. Did he pick it? He did! Racing down the sideline is Aqib Talib. Gurley for MVP! Touchdown LA! Picked off by John Johnson. Well, it's Dante Fowler who is able to get to breathe. Greg Zuerlein sends the Rams to the Super Bowl! LA will play for the Lombardi!
All right, guys, welcome back. It's the Downtown Rams podcast, episode 251. I'm your host, Jake Ellenbogen. Joining me, as always, is Alexis Kraft. And this is the Rams Falcons Week 7 preview. I can't believe we're already in Week 7. Basically, the Rams coming into this game 3-3. Falcons coming into this game 1-5. It's been kind of funny with the Falcons, since it seems like any team that is struggling seems to automatically have their fix as soon as they play the Falcons. The Rams are coming off 3 straight losses, hoping not to make 4. They made an incredible move to acquire the best cornerback, in my opinion, in the league, in Jalen Ramsey. They made a trade to obviously acquire Austin Corbett, and they made a trade to acquire Kenny Young, which also sent away their starting quarterback Marcus Peters. So some shoveling around of this team. They had some injuries, obviously. Aqib Talib goes on IR. John Johnson goes on IR. Joe Nopum goes on IR, and he's done for the year with the torn ACL. And now it looks like Malcolm Brown and Todd Gurley have swapped. Todd Gurley looks like he's likely going to play, and Malcolm Brown has the same exact thigh injury that Todd Gurley had last week. So it's all kind of interesting, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of storylines and what have you. But Alexis, let's just get your thoughts to start off, coming into this Atlanta Falcons game, a road game, and it's going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, so the Falcons are an interesting team this year because going into the year, if you were to look at the Falcons roster, this is a team that isn't, you would think talent-wise, just looking at who they have on their team, isn't half bad. I mean, they have guys like Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, of course, Devontae Freeman, Calvin Ridley. So that's, interesting. And even on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, you got guys like Vic Beasley, Takaris McKinley, Desmond Trufant, Deion Jones, and, guys who you could, arguably say haven't been playing as good as in recent years as they have in the past. But so it's been interesting to kind of see the rapid decline of these Atlanta Falcons, because this is not a team that I would have expected to tank this hard, I should say, this season. So going into this game, obviously it looks like a game that we 1,000% should win. But like we've said on every show, wins aren't handed to you. You got to go play the game. You got to earn it. You can't go into any game just assuming that you're going to win and that it's going to be handed to you, because it won't. If we go into this week unprepared and sloppy, we won't win this game. So, going into this week, I do think that the Rams are finally, I would say they have a chance to really turn things around offensively, right? Because the Rams have really struggled offensively, especially coming off of 2 seasons in a row where our offense was on fire. We've had a lot of trouble. A lot of that has to do with the offensive line, and a lot of it has to do with Jared Goff's decision-making skills this season. So I do think that, looking at the Falcons defense, I think that their defense is just what I've seen from them this season has been downright bad. They've just been bad. Teams have walked all over them. The Rams, I don't think, are going to be any different, especially if they play their game. So that's going to be something that us Rams fans should really look out for, is the Rams on the offensive side of the ball. And we also need to look at the Falcons on that offensive side of the ball. I mean, look, you got guys like Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Devontae Freeman, Calvin Ridley, who might be injured right now. I can't remember right now. Mohamed Sanu, guys like that, they are definitely an offensive team as much as they have been struggling. So I think this is going to be an offensive game. And Jake, let's get into one of the guys that we traded for on the offensive line, Austin Corbett. And how do you think he's going to be used in this game? And how crucial do you think in this game, as always, the offensive line is going to hold up against this Falcons defense? Because I do think that they have a chance to be better this week than they have in recent weeks.
Yeah, so when I look at Austin Corbett, obviously coming in this game, I think I've said it before, he's the second most talented offensive lineman on this roster, I think. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but I think the talent is there. However, he needs to get acclimated because he's not a Jalen Ramsey at his craft. He's not somebody that you can just have, throw him out there and be like, a lockdown type of guy. It's kind of different with corners that have that, ability to really shut down one side of the field. You can really just throw man-to-man coverage on one guy the whole time, as I expect the Rams will. Jalen Ramsey shadowing Julio Jones. But with Austin Corbett, he needs to gain, an understanding of the offense. And I think Les Snead kind of alluded to the idea that they plan on, or not Les Snead, I think it was Aaron Cromer. They plan on, bringing him along slowly. So I don't know if we'll see him necessarily, which is kind of a bummer, but it might be the best for him. A guy that you and I are both really high on, though, David Edwards, is set to make his NFL starting debut at left guard. I love the move. I think do something different. You needed a shuffling. I know he's more of a tackle, but, bottom line is I don't really care. I have him way higher in regard than, Bobby Evans, and he's way higher on the totem pole, in comparison to Jamil Demby, in my opinion. So, I just, that's kind of how I see it. So I'm excited to see David Edwards, and I have a feeling that David Edwards is going to instantly, kind of change how the Rams offense moves. And granted, the barometer, I mean, going up against, the Falcons defense, like you said, teams have walked on. It's not, it's not going to be, you're going to have to keep your expectations, tempered a little bit. But I do think this is a huge opportunity to get things back on track before, obviously you do have the game against Cincinnati. So things are going to get a little easier here. Not saying that they're extremely hard for the Rams, but they did play a decent first, 6 games on the schedule with really only one game that I looked at where I was thinking, yeah, that's definitely a cakewalk, and that was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game, in which one of the ones they lost. So, it's definitely going to be interesting with that. But yeah, I don't see Austin Corbett. I don't see him playing much, and if he does, then there's going to be some serious injuries. I think I don't even know if he's going to be active, unfortunately, but I'd love to see him, get some opportunity if he can.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the keys to this game, Jake, is Jared Goff, because, like I said earlier, no win is handed to you, right? I mean, this is a game, guys. The Rams should win. They should win it easily. Looking at how the Falcons have performed this season, comparing talent between rosters, the Rams should win this. But there's also been games this season that the Rams should have won as well, and they didn't. So if the Rams come into, this game thinking they're going to win or not prepared or just playing sloppy and unfocused, they're not going to win. And I think that one of the keys for them to win this game is going to be Jared Goff and his accuracy and his focus and the way that he plays. Because, I think if he plays his game and doesn't panic, and hopefully the offensive line gives him a couple more seconds, to breathe and move around, I think that he could have a big game against this Falcons defense. This Falcons defense, like I said, has just been downright bad this entire season. So, if Jared Goff focuses, plays his game, and is comfortable out there, I think it's going to be a really big game for him. I think it's going to be a game that he needs to do well at, quite frankly, because listen, the way that he's been playing has not been good. And again, we've talked about it on this show. We don't need to get into it again, but a lot of that contributes to the offensive line. But a lot of it also just contributed, to him and the mental decisions that Jared Goff has been making. And I think that he can fix it. I think he needs to go out this week. I think if Jared Goff goes out against the Falcons and is himself, plays well, is focused, I think it could be a really big morale booster, not only for him, but for the team. So I think one of the biggest keys to this game is going to be the way that Jared Goff plays. What do you think, Jake?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, the Rams aren't going to win a football game against the Atlanta Falcons without Jared Goff playing well. And I think this is really important to say because while the Falcons are 1-5, it's a little misleading. Matt Ryan is balling out this year. The offense is scoring points. Okay, Matt Ryan, I've seen him, constantly. He's right up there among the league leaders every week in passing, and people can say it's garbage time or not, but bottom line is this guy is getting the ball out. He's throwing. He's getting guys. Julio Jones and of course Mohamed Sanu and Calvin Ridley and Austin Hooper, who's been huge for this team. I just think that you really have to keep in mind that this game could turn into a shootout, which I think it will. I think it's way too much. It's way too much of a shakeup of the defense. I do expect the defense to take a step back in some way this week, just because you have Marcus Peters in the building. He's been your number one corner. Just switching to Jalen Ramsey like that, who's not familiar with the system. I mean, obviously he's going to be the better option moving forward. He's the better corner. But I think it's less about Jalen Ramsey and more about the fact that they're now switching from Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib and kind of throwing, Troy Hill and throwing Darius Williams into more of a bigger role. And I think just that it's going to take longer than just like 1 week to get everything going. So I do actually see in this game, Julio Jones, I think he's going to be somewhat contained by Jalen Ramsey because I think they're just going to have him just shut him down, just shadow him. And I think because of that, you could see somebody like Calvin Ridley having a huge game, because I think he's going to be able to, maybe take Troy Hill deep on a couple balls down the field, like the Falcons like to do. So, Jared Goff, going back to what you said, Jared Goff 100% has to have his A game. He has to be able to play well because while this is a 1-5 team, it's more so because of the defense, not because of the offense.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think that you said it, pretty spot on, but let's talk about our receivers, because something that we've seen all season is Jared Goff has basically just been trying to get Cooper Kupp the ball whenever he can, right? And that's not to take anything away from Cooper Kupp because he's obviously an amazing receiver, very talented, deserves everything that he's getting. But also we do see that sometimes Jared Goff clouds his judgment and is trying to get Cooper Kupp the ball. Do you think that this is the week that we see maybe Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods get more involved? Robert Woods is kind of slowly but surely starting to get more involved, but it's been kind of, crazy that Brandon Cooks hasn't, entirely had the season that he has in the past with us. Do you think that this week maybe is the week that Cooks finally breaks out?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you bring it up because I do think that, again, you and I have talked about this and have seen them in person. These guys are getting open, and this has not been Goff's year. This has not been, a great year for Jared Goff. He hasn't really been able to get the ball to Brandon Cooks, or, he's neglected at least one of the receivers, right? You've had a couple games where these, two guys went over 100 yards and, one of the guys was kind of left out of the equation. And I think you're seeing that more and more with Brandon Cooks, namely. So I do expect in this type of, scenario, I think that Brandon Cooks is going to be matched up against Isaiah Oliver, who is a former second round pick in 2018. I think that's probably who will end up getting matched up. And then I think the number one corner for the Falcons, former first round pick Desmond Trufant, is going to be matched up on Robert Woods. And then I think, it's going to be another Cooper Kupp game, in my opinion, because he's going to be matched up on DeMonte Kazee, and I'm not really a huge fan of him. I think he's solid, but he's cool for them because he's able to play multiple positions, can play slot corner, can play safety, can play boundary. He's now manning the slot, so I think Cooper Kupp is just going to be kind of a mismatch for him. So really, Jared Goff shouldn't have a problem finding guys that are open. With that being said, you look at the back end of the secondary and they're beat up because their top guy, Keanu Neal, is out for the year. He's on IR. So, they have Kamal Ishmael and Ricardo Allen. And I don't know about you, but I'm not quaking my boots over those guys, So that's just kind of how I see the secondary. I think it's a huge golden opportunity for Jared Goff. I think it's a huge opportunity for somebody like Brandon Cooks to get over the top and catch maybe a touchdown or two. Kind of similar to the situation the Rams have, because John Johnson's out, so Marquis Christian is going to man the safety spot there with Eric Weddle. And then, of course, they're going to use Taylor Rapp in the same type of mold that you would expect him to, like that pseudo linebacker role. But I think this is going to allow a faster receiver, a guy that's quicker out of his breaks, and a guy that's quicker off the line of scrimmage, great release, in Calvin Ridley, to have a couple of those big plays. Brandon Cooks right up there with him. So I think, those speedsters, you talk about playing on turf. I think those guys really have an advantage in this one.
Yeah, definitely. And to get into predictions for this game, guys, I think people are going to like me again this week, because my prediction this week is the Rams are going to win this game, I think 35-21. So I think we're going to win it pretty easily, but I do think it's going to be a heavily offensive game. I think that, the stars on our offense and the stars in their offense are going to shine. I not to take anything away from our defense, but I just think that this week, you've got Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Devontae Freeman, like all those guys that I mentioned. I think that, they're very talented. Again, like you said, it's very misleading that they're 1-5. As a team and their defense, they're just not doing well, but I do think that their offense is going to be somewhat productive this week. But I'm going to say that I think Jalen Ramsey has an interception this week. I think he comes out with this first game with the Rams, and I think that he has an interception this week. Maybe even a pick six, but I'm just going to go with an interception. Jake, what's your prediction?
Yeah, so I'm looking at a high-scoring game. If you are a bettor, I'm taking the over all day. I don't know what the over is, and I don't really care, frankly. It's going to be 45-35. I think this is a game where the Rams get up early on, and while the Falcons don't go away and they continue to score, I think the Rams control the game for the most part. Obviously, being a Rams fan at the end, you'll probably be sweating it out because you'll be like, okay, the Falcons have an opportunity here. But I still expect them to win by 10. Look, I think this is a huge... This could not come at a better time. This is a perfect time to get the offense going. This is also a perfect time to have a transitional game, for the defense, because this isn't going to be a game. You're not going against a team that is just an unstoppable offense. You're going against a good offense, but a not so great defense, which, helps your other side of the ball. Doesn't put too much pressure on the defense. So you're making this transition. You're basically shipping out one of your starting corners, and you're adding another starting corner with no experience of this scheme and everything like that. So, I think this is a good transitional period. This is a good transitional game. And I think you're looking at 45-35 because you can't expect a defense like this. it takes 11 guys. You cannot expect a defense like this to go through this transition, not have any bumps in the road. I think the Rams made this decision, obviously, because Jalen Ramsey is one, I think he's the best cornerback in the league, but, they made this decision looking ahead. This is a postseason decision. This is going to make their team better in the long run. Right now, they're going to have to go through these growing pains, and I do expect them to be there. But I also think that they expect the offense, to be a lot better. And I think Jamil Demby was that bad to the point where the offensive line just was way too noticeably horrible. And, Jared Goff was in his head and couldn't get things going. I know you and I have talked about it, the idea of benching Jared Goff, and I've had multiple people ask, like, are you still on that? Or was that some, knee-jerk reaction? It wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. It was me not realizing that the Rams were playing the Falcons the next week and then promptly playing the Bengals. I do believe Jared Goff should 100% play. As a matter of fact, in my daily fantasy, I'd be starting him. I'd be starting Kupp, and I'd be starting Gerald Everett, because bottom line is I think Goff is going to have a really good game. You've already seen the ability for him to throw for over 500 yards, and the willingness of the Rams to let him throw the football. And then I think, Todd Gurley being back, I do believe he'll be back. I think that'll be huge. I just think there's just too much there for, a porous back end of the secondary to really hold down the Rams. And that's why I do feel like they'll have the upper hand in this one.
Definitely. There's definitely reason to be optimistic going into this game. All the Rams really need to do is just play, the game that we know that they can play for whatever reason they, a lot of reasons they haven't in the past few weeks, but I do think they can get that back. I think, fans should be hopeful and optimistic going into this game. And I do think it's going to be a game that afterwards Rams fans are happy with.
Yeah. And I think, I think the cool thing about this one is also, and this won't get, talked about, because the offensive line has gone up against some tough matchups. We talked about the Panthers, that defensive line to start off the year. To kick off the year with that defensive line was something else. I mean, they have guys like Brian Burns on there. They grabbed McCoy. They grabbed Poe. I mean, they have a lot of talent there. Mario Addison, and then of course Kawan Short. And then you think about like just playing the next game, and they go up against the Saints. I mean, we saw the Saints defensive line kind of stifle the Rams running game. I mean, they are a good defensive line. Have guys like Cameron Jordan and have guys like Sheldon Rankins, and I mean, they're a very good defensive line. Trey Hendrickson, Marcus Davenport. And then week 3, they go up against the Browns, and, the Browns had one of the best defensive lines on paper. I mean, Sheldon Richardson and Myles Garrett and Olivier Vernon and, Larry Ogunjobi. And it's like, so you're like, well, this is a lot of pressure on this offensive line. And then, they've gone up against a lot, and that's kind of what I'm saying. So here, going up against those type of teams, obviously, it didn't get really much easier against the Seahawks, having to defend, Jadeveon Clowney and Poona Ford and Quentin Jefferson, guys like that. And then the 49ers, as crazy as the test that they've had, the 49ers was the biggest test, and they failed at it. Don't get me wrong. They also dealt with a serious injury in the middle of their offensive line. But they went up against the likes of Nick Bosa and Arik Armstead and DeForest Buckner and Dee Ford. And I mean, Solomon Thomas just coming off the bench. So, they've gone up against their fair share of, scary defensive lines. This week, though, I feel good about the offensive line this week. I feel good to the point where they're not going to look like the Built Ford Tough offensive line of the year that they won, last year. But they're going to look a lot better. I think they're going to give Goff a lot of time, not a lot of time, but a decent amount of time. It's really up to Jared Goff to make the throws, which I think he will. I think this is really going to be a wake-up call, losing 3 straight. But going up against Allen Bailey, Tyler Davison, Grady Jarrett, and Takkarist McKinley, in my opinion, Grady Jarrett's the one that really stands out to me. I do really like Grady Jarrett. I think he's a really good player. Obviously, they have Vic Beasley as well. But, to me, I think Grady Jarrett could pose an issue interior-wise. David Edwards could have a problem with that, and they're going to have to double him. But Tyler Davison doesn't scare me and shouldn't scare you. I really like Deidre Sennett, who is in the back end on the depth chart. They also have Adrian Claiborne and John Kaminsky, the rookie that I interviewed at the Senior Bowl. Takaris McKinley is, a former first-round pick. I'm not, entirely huge on. Alan Bailey is the guy that, when I bring up that Jared Goff hasn't been the same since that hit against Kansas City, Alan Bailey was the one that laid that hit. And Vic Beasley, he had that 1 year where it looked like he was going to be one of the best premier pass rushers in the league, and he really hasn't been that. So, I look at this as a golden opportunity for the offensive line, struggling offensive line, to go up against an easier, opponent. And I think, just looking, kind of just shadowing or highlighting one of the guys in the defense to watch out for. I mean, you've seen him. You saw him in the playoffs in 2017. Deion Jones, the middle linebacker. He's a new age backer, second-round pick in 2016. I think he's one of the best middle linebackers in football. He's got that crazy 4.4 speed, so, he can cover anybody. I think it's going to be tough for Gerald Everett, but I think it's a good matchup for him. He could definitely, do well against that. So, I think this is a huge opportunity for the offensive line. The Falcons still have talent on their defense, and obviously we could talk all day about their offense, Matt Ryan, and they have Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu, and of course Calvin Ridley. I think the big thing here, the lack of run game. So this is a huge opportunity for the Rams. They really have to put their best foot forward, because it is going to get easier for a little bit, and then you're going to come right off the bye and go up against the likes of the Steelers and the Cowboys and the Ravens. So it gets harder at the end of the schedule. So they need to win these games, and they need to win them now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hopefully everything we've said is, going to come through the way that we think it will, and look at the win this week.
Hopefully. So yeah, that's going to do it. The Rams can really only control what they can control. They put themselves in the situation. 49ers are probably looking at 6-0, but you went out, you go 13-3. That's how you should look at it. So, with that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you like what you hear, be sure to leave a review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, as always, Jake Ellenbogen, Alexis Kraft signing off. Until next time. Take care, guys. Enjoy the game. Horns up.